Okay, so now I'm into my top 10 of them. There's only 18 movies, but here's the top 10 of them. So my number 10 is Ant-Man. This is the only one of the Marvel movies I would say that leans more into the comedic aspects of it that I think works for me. It's probably mainly more just my sense of humor, where Spider-Man didn't work for me. This one does, so I'm fine with it. I really like Paul Rudd, and I really like his best friend, and I think the whole supporting cast works pretty well, other than the villain. But that's kind of par for the course for Marvel. But I really like Kirk Douglas as the original Ant-Man. Michael Douglas, sorry. We just went over that. Michael Douglas. I think he's really good. You can really feel the history and buy that he used to be a superhero, and it kind of made me wish that they and this he's too old, but it made me wish that there was an Ant-Man movie where he was Ant-Man.
Yeah, like in the 80s or whatever.
It's a very good mentor relationship with Paul Rudd's Ant-Man, and the villain, he's not good, as I said before. It's just he's another bald businessman who goes into a suit at the end for whatever reason, and him and Ant-Man fight, and he's just Ironmonger. I mean, he really just is. He's just this evil businessman who makes this suit.
And he's a lot less clever.
Yeah, and he's less clever than... it's just a reversal of that, because Obadiah is Iron Man's mentor, and Hank was this guy. I don't remember his name. This guy's mentor. So it's just the student is the villain instead of the mentor being the villain.
And he's ticked off for reasons that we don't really understand.
Yeah, it doesn't. He's just like, I don't.
It's
like
because
you.
It's because his formulas made him crazy. Because that's how he's
Did they establish that? I don't know. He's just there's really nothing to him. There's maybe a few little things here or there where there could be potential. They don't do anything.
He's occasionally
with it.
threatening in certain scenes, but yeah.
Yeah, the humor works for me in this movie, and Ant-Man actually goes through a character arc where, he wants to be responsible, but he goes and takes the easy path, and then he learns to go and do it the hard way, and he has to be a hero.
Do the hard work, yeah.
And Hank Pym helps him, show him the way to do that, and it's a nice, fun, enjoyable little movie. And other than the villain, most of it works. And the whole heist part is cool. I like heist movies, and so yeah, it's a small, well-made, fun little Marvel movie. It's nothing amazing, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. It's also my next one on my list, number 10. If I had one major complaint, it's that Michael Douglas, the Hank Pym, his arc is in some ways more interesting and almost overshadows Scott Lang's arc. To the point where it almost feels like it should be about him and his daughter, and then Scott Lang should be a supporting character. But it almost doesn't matter because they're both interesting things, and it works. I think the action is better generally than a lot of the Marvel movies. As you said, the effects hold up better, or I don't know if we mentioned that. Actually.
You said it first, and I agree.
Yeah, but the effects I think hold up really well. The humor also works for me. I think it's pretty funny. I would like to mention that Edgar Wright, I think everyone knows at this point was going to make this movie, and it is kind of disappointing they didn't make it, because, it's fun, and, it's fine, but it feels like maybe it could have been a lot better. But, oh well, we'll never know what would have happened, I guess. Maybe it would have worked. I also really like, I guess I already said that, but Michael Douglas, and I kind of wish we could have gotten a movie about him in the 80s, but yeah, I don't know. Doing the whole thing with makeup or CGI would probably not work so well. So
probably just shouldn't go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is maybe the most just kind of solid, okay, not a ton of glaring flaws MCU movie without being great. So what's your next pick?
Alright, so my number 9 is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I don't really like this movie that much, but there is a lot of really good things in it. Who's the guy who made these movies?
James Gunn.
James Gunn is clearly very passionate about these movies, and it comes through and shows. The same can't be said for at least some of these Marvel movies, but he's very passionate about it, and he clearly has a lot of control of it, and he has story in mind, and he's able to do what he wants to do. I think he got he's a little too overly ambitious, and he just tries to do too much. And I think unfortunately it kind of it hurts the whole movie overall, because he's kind of like Avengers 2. He tries to give someone something interesting to do, but there's just too many people, and it doesn't work. It works to some extent, but it doesn't work as well as I think it did for a lot of people. I know it's gonna seem like I really don't like this movie, but I don't dislike it. It's pretty funny, and it's very imaginative and unique, and has really good effects. And it has an enjoyable soundtrack. I find the whole 80s nostalgia thing a bit obnoxious at this point, but I do like the music.
Well, a lot of it's 60s and 70s, but
whatever, just everyone has old music in their movies now, and it gets a bit annoying. But the villain, I don't know. This whole movie is I'm conflicted about it. Like, I really like the performance, Kurt Russell's performance, yeah. But I don't know if he's actually a good villain or not. I mean, because again, his plan is just, I'm gonna kill a bunch of people in the universe. I'm just gonna kill everyone or something. And that's kind of that's what they all want to do. I mean, it's a charismatic performance. It's Kurt Russell. He's really a great actor. But once you get down to what he wants to do, he's just a big evil villain who wants to kill a bunch of people. And Peter's story arc. Again, I get it. He just the dad he never had. He finally finds his real dad. And at first he's cautious and not sure about it, but then he accepts it, and he's happy about it. But then it turns out he's evil, and then at the end he realizes that Yantu was really his perfect father, or at least good enough, and he realized that too late. But my problem is that really wasn't set up in the first movie, and him and Yantu almost interact none in this movie. Until the end. I know that narratively and structurally that really wouldn't work, because you have to have Peter with his real dad, and you can't really have Yandu there because Yandu knows that his real dad is crazy and evil. But that didn't work for me, because him and Yandu didn't have enough of a relationship before. And then Gamora, her and her sister, they hate each other, and then they just they have an arc where they both learn to accept what happened in the past and care about each other now, but it just kind of comes abruptly. They're fighting each other, and then they just stop, and then they just forgive each other. Well, why? When the movie just doesn't have enough time to flesh it out. And I do think the movie's pretty funny, but some of the humor doesn't work for me, mainly with Drax. He gets kind of annoying after a while, and I also think Baby Groot is kind of also really annoying. And then Rocket, again, I understand the character arc that they're trying to do and that he goes through, but his works, but I just think he's kind of an unlikable jerk through the whole movie, unfortunately. But, I do understand, he does it because he doesn't want to get close to people and then get hurt when something happens to them, so he acts like that on purpose. But he's just really unlikable, and he's, in the first movie, it worked better, and he just wasn't as unlikable. It was he kind of went through the same story arc, but whatever, so James Gunn put a lot of heart and soul into it, and he tries to give everything to do, and it's a funny movie and colorful and unique, but like Avengers 2, there's just too much going on, and it doesn't all mesh together perfectly.
Yeah, so I like the movie a lot better than you do, and it's higher on my list. The one thing I'm going to say now is that I think it works in some ways almost better as its own movie than it does as a sequel. Certain things could have been set up better in the first movie, and it feels like maybe it wasn't planned overall as well as it could be. And part of it for me is I reserve judgment almost until the third one comes out, and to see how it all comes full circle, because it's reportedly going to be the last one with the main cast. So we'll see how it goes, but yeah, I'll talk about this movie more later on. So my next one is Black Panther. So this movie is this huge deal right now. It's the highest grossing MCU movie, and everyone's talking about it. And I understand why. I think there's a lot of interesting themes, politically and otherwise going on in this movie. I think it has a really good villain. I think Killmonger is one of the better MCU villains. I think the direction is quite strong. It looks visually really amazing. Some of the effects maybe not. It's inconsistent in that regard, but the cinematography I think is really amazing. The action is also lacking, unfortunately.
Yes.
But, I think Chadwick Boseman does a good job in the main role, although at times he feels a little bit stiff. In some ways that's just the character. And in some ways I think, and this is really the main problem, he's kind of overshadowed by other characters, and there's just kind of too many characters. Like there's his mom and his sister and his girlfriend, and I feel like maybe if we just focused on one of those three, it might be a little better, like in their relationship with Black Panther, because he's got all these different relationships, and like as a result it just feels unfocused. And it's the same way with the villain, where it's like we cut away to the villain doing something, and then eventually we find out what the villain is up to, and like the way it's structured is just really weird and kind of makes the movie hard to get into. I think for the most part, I'm glad that it doesn't rely too much on humor, and it doesn't try to subvert like emotional moments, except for one moment, which I'm not gonna talk about specifically, but it really annoyed me. As I said, some of the effects and action really aren't great. A lot of it's very murky, like with the way the action's lit, and there's a lot of questionable CGI during the action scenes. So I think this movie maybe is a little overrated. I think it's partly just because it is really good in the stuff it does well. It just has a difficult time structuring it into a really coherent narrative. But yeah, I mean, it's still number 9 on my list, so I did quite like it. But I feel like I need to see it more maybe to let it really sink in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just think it has some major structural issues.
Yeah, my number 8 is Black Panther, as your number 9 is, right? So
yeah.
I have similar thoughts on the movie. I don't want to contradict what I've been saying before, because I've been complaining to some extent about how some of the more recent Marvel movies have had, or not too much, but their humor is reducing the emotional impact of the stories that they're trying to tell, and this one does not have that problem. But and the problem is you said Chadwick Boseman seems a little bit like
humorless,
bland. I mean,
yeah,
it almost basically works, but like sometimes it's like you're a bit dull, dude. I really liked him in Civil War. He was really good in that, but then in this one he just seemed a little bit dull.
Maybe he just works as better as a supporting character. I don't know.
We'll see. Well, in Infinity War,
he kind of comes alive in a few scenes with the sister, but for the most part, he's just lacking in charisma.
Yeah.
In his interactions with other people.
Yeah, but again, like I was saying, like I don't. Everyone doesn't have to be jokey and like really charismatic.
Not everyone has to be Tony Stark. But.
So it seemed it was a bit problematic, but I think it mostly works. And he needs to be kind of like that for the character of Black Panther and what he's like. But so there's that. The villain Killmonger, he is very good. He's a very interesting, emotional character. You completely understand him. His plan in the end. This again, we're coming back to this. He's a pretty good villain, but his end plan is just I'm gonna kill a bunch of people. Okay, I mean, I guess there's always something like that. But
well, I mean, he wants to start a revolution. It's maybe a little vague, but
it was basically just we're gonna kill a bunch of white people. That's how I took it. But whatever.
But I mean, like there's a purpose behind it. It's not just like we're gonna kill him for the sake of killing him.
Well, there's usually a purpose, but
yeah,
like it doesn't. He's an interesting person, and he has an interesting story, but then he doesn't want to do anything interesting. He just wants to take over the world. But the performance, again, really good. The supporting cast, I think there is too many characters. There's the movie, like you said, sister, girlfriend, mother, uncle, best friend, and then for some reason they have Martin Freeman and the CIA in it, and I really don't understand why any of that is in it at all.
I mean, he's supposed to be like the entry point for the audience.
We need
where it's like,
someone to say exposition too, which
Right.
I think it's another problem with the movie is that it's not an origin story, but they had to set up Wakanda, and there's a little too much exposition and going around and having scenes just showing us how everything works around here, and it slows the movie down.
Yeah,
It's
where
a bit
some of the structural
weirdly
problems
put
come
together. And then so that's part of the structural problem. But then after things start to pick up, it gets kind of weird because Black Panther, I won't give any spoilers, but he's not in the movie for like a while. Like he's just not in anymore, and he's the main character, and it's kind of like it's at least 30 minutes to the movie. So the whole thing is a bit weirdly put together. Some of the effects are really good, some of it looks really nice, but some of it, mainly evolving around the action, just it doesn't look that good. And something that's it's been through a lot of these movies you're talking about, when the effects don't look that good, it really takes you out of the action, unfortunately. It's not. Sometimes the action isn't even well shot, but sometimes even if it's decently shot, the effects just don't look good at all, and you're completely taken out of it. It's very unfortunate because there's an actual good villain, and his conflict with the main hero is actually interesting. So it's unfortunate that it didn't have better action, but it is a pretty good movie.
It has a good soundtrack. I should mention.
It's a good soundtrack.
Very distinctive.
I like it's a Marvel movie that has, unlike the last few, it's taking itself pretty seriously. There's still humor. It works better. It feels like some of the really, really good Marvel movies. Other than the fact that Black Panther feels a little bit dull at times, it works for the most part, and I was really refreshing to see that again after Spider-Man and Thor and Ant-Man and all that. I think it was pretty good overall. There is a lot of flaws. I don't understand why everyone thinks it's the greatest thing ever, but it's pretty good.
Alright. So number 8 on my list is Captain America: Civil War. So this is another movie that I really liked when it first came out. I liked especially how comic booky it was in certain places with the airport scene and all that. But I've kind of liked it less over time. I still like it quite a bit. It is number 8. But I think it has some tonal issues for sure. I think the airport scene, as much as I like it, feels kind of at odds with the rest of the movie because it's just a little too lighthearted and silly. And the rest of the movie is pretty serious and dark. I think Spider-Man feels shoehorned in. I like his parts in the movie, but he just doesn't really feel like he needs to be there. And honestly, having Iron Man kind of call him into this situation just feels completely irresponsible, especially considering that being accountable is his whole thing in this movie. So that's kind of a problem. It has problems that other MCU movies have, like the action isn't always the best. It's fine for the most part. The CGI stuff is all good, but a lot of the more practical stuff, it just isn't shot and edited the best. But it is a really good movie. It's one of the darker movies in the MCU overall. I think the conflict between Tony Stark and Captain America is done really well for the most part. The whole fight between the two at the end is really good. I think the villain, Zemo, although I don't know why he's Zemo because he's nothing like Zemo from the comics, but I think he's still a good villain and he has a good motivation. His plan is a little bit convoluted and confusing, unfortunately, but Black Panther is really good in it. I think you mentioned that. His whole arc of giving up on his revenge is really well done. I like the relationship between Scarlet Witch and Vision. I think that was well done, and it's something from the comics. So it was just kind of cool to see. I think all the characters are handled pretty well and have something to do for the most part. Again, there's some people shoehorned in like Ant-Man and Spider-Man, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean he feels more. It's more appropriate that he's there because he is an Avenger and he knows these people, but.
Spider-Man's the only one that really feels out of place.
Yeah, for sure.
Mainly because it's his introduction.
Yeah. And you have to like take like 10 minutes or whatever to go to New York and get him. The political issues are maybe not as like, I don't know, deep as they could be, or some people think they are. Like it's pretty basic stuff, I think, for the most part. It's just like security versus freedom or whatever. But I'd like that it informs the characters, and I think it works well in the context of the movie. I think it might have been better if Rhodey had died. Him just getting crippled, especially with the technology available in this universe, feels a little bit like it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, there are definitely some problems with the movie, but I do think it's quite good overall. So
Number 7 on my list is Captain America: Civil War. I didn't like this movie that much when it came out. I didn't hate it. There was a lot of good stuff in it, and I saw a lot of potential. When I watched it again, I liked it more, and I think it almost works overall. But I still there's still a lot of little problems, and then the biggest problem comes in what you already talked about in the airport fight scene, where it's an impressive and enjoyable and fun fight, but it almost just it destroys the narrative of the movie, because no one is taking it seriously, and like the fight kind of feels pointless, and I don't really understand why they're fighting, because no one's really that angry at that point, and they're not really achieving anything.
yeah, I wouldn't say it destroys the movie anyway. It just feels like unnecessary, and it doesn't do anything.
I would say it almost does. I really don't like how that scene is handled, but
I mean, like, if that happened after Tony Stark found out about his father, then it would. But like, where it is, it just feels like it's not like doing anything for the plot.
it's just stupid, and it makes. I mean, things were somewhat like serious between the tension between everyone up until that point. I mean, yeah, it didn't reach the emotional levels that we get to at the end. But up to that point, there's a lot of stuff going on, and then the scene just deflates the whole conflict, really, for me. But I liked what happens before and after that more than I did the first time, especially the ending. The ending, the first time I saw it, I was expecting Cap to die, and so when he didn't die, and then plus what had happened with the airport stuff, I just felt like the movie kind of comped out and didn't really do anything. But watching it again, it is a very emotionally resonant, and the conflict between Tony and Cap has come to a head, and it makes sense for their characters, and it does work. It's just disappointing that what they had done in the airport scene before that almost ruined it for me. But it is pretty high on my list. So I think it mostly works. Like you said, Black Panther, he's really good. I was a little disappointed with him in Black Panther, as I said, but his introduction in this is very good, and he has a very good arc, which is impressive because there's so many people, and the movie does do a fairly good job of balancing them, at least all the major players. I mean, at this point in these big movies, there's gonna be people in it that just aren't given as much attention and don't have as much to do. There has to be certain people that they focus more on. And it is a Captain America movie, technically, so he should be the main focus, which he is. It's kind of interesting because in this one, the big plot that's going on kind of takes more of a back seat to the more personal stuff Cap is going through with Bucky and Iron Man, which I do like. One of the problems I have with Winter Soldier is that the bigger plot kind of takes front seat to the more emotional stuff. In this movie, they do it better, where what's happening personally with these characters is in the forefront. And so that's very good. I mean, it is mainly at this point, watching again, just that the airport scene deflates a lot of the tension for me, and the fact that no one is taking it seriously. And a lot of the action, the hand-to-hand combat, when it's not a big CGI thing, it's not that great. Although the ending stuff is pretty good. It has a very good ending, as I said. So overall, it's a pretty good movie. I know that part at the airport really hurts it for me a lot, I think, but everything before is really good, and the ending is really, really good, I think. So it's pretty good.
Okay, so my number 7 is Doctor Strange. So this is a movie that has actually grown on me. I liked it well enough when we first saw it, but it was just kind of another Marvel movie. But watching it again for this rewatch, I really really liked it, and I think part of it is because we've been talking about this whole time. Marvel has had this problem with humor lately, and Doctor Strange is one of the few movies in Phase 3 that really kind of just takes itself seriously and works on an emotional level really well. There's that one scene that a lot of people complain about, which I hate, where he's putting his cape on and then like it turns into like a funny thing. But other than that, I really like the movie. I think it has a really good cast. Benedict Cumberbatch, I mean, I guess his accent isn't perfect, but he's really good as Doctor Strange. Tilda Swinton, despite the controversy or whatever, was really good as the Ancient One. I can't think of that. I don't think I can pronounce the actor's name who plays Mordo, but he's really good. And I can't wait to see the sequel. I want to see what they do with him because he could be one of the better, maybe the best MCU villain ever, because they set him up really well. Mads Mikkelsen is kind of wasted, but at least you kind of understand his motivation, and it like makes an interesting like philosophical sort of idea, and like helps to challenge like the Ancient One and sort of Doctor Strange's worldview at that point in the movie. So that works better than it could. It's one of the few movies in the MCU, maybe the only one, that actually gets better as it goes along. Like the first act is just kind of okay, and then the second act is when it really starts to get interesting, and then the third act is like really, really great. The whole thing with him challenging Dormammu and using the time loop thing, that was one of the most clever endings in the whole MCU. So that all works really well. The movie's pretty good visually. It's not as good as it could be. I think some of the action is a little lacking again. Although I do like the fight between him and Scott Adkins. But yeah, I think it's just a really strong origin movie. Probably the best MCU solo film that doesn't have Iron Man in it. It has one of the better scores. I think Michael Giacchino did a really good job with the score. And I like how seriously, not just that they treat the story, but the whole world with the magical stuff. They don't treat it like it's something silly. It feels really, really serious, and I don't want to say grounded because that's not the right word, but it's the first time you really get to see this magical part of the MCU done in this way, and I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I think it's one of the better MCU movies.
Okay, so the 6th movie on my list is the first Guardians of the Galaxy. I like this movie a lot. I can understand why some people like the second one more. It's more ambitious, and it gets more crazy and wild, and James Gunn probably was allowed to do more what he wanted to do and had more control. But I just feel this one, structurally and narratively, is more solid and works a little bit better. It's a pretty, it's more straightforward, and they try to do more in the second one, but I think it just works better overall in this one. Visually, it's again, the second one is probably a little bit better visually, but this one is also really good. And I did the cast. Well, other than Drax, I think they're all very good. Drax probably gets a little bit better in the second one, even though he kind of becomes more of a jokey character. In this one, he's a little bit one-note, where he just wants to fight things and kill Ronin. And
he
that's
doesn't
about,
understand
he doesn't understand humor or metaphors.
Yeah, metaphors.
So he's a little bit one note. They don't do much with him in this first movie. But other than that, I think Star-Lord, Gamora, Rocket, and Groot, they're all very good and interesting characters. I really like Rocket and Groot. In the second one, as I've said before, I find Rocket a bit irritating, and I find Groot very irritating. In this one, I really like the relationship with one another, and I understand where Rocket comes from more. And he, he's a jerk, but I don't know if it's the writing or if they just took it farther in the second one, but he's a jerk, but he comes off more likable.
I think part
instead
of
of
it is
unlikable.
I think part of it is that Groot dies, and that might change him to some extent.
And he doesn't really die. You know, I wish they had talked about that in the second one. Like,
Yeah, because they've said that he's not really the same person. They never make that
Yeah.
clear. But in any case, he's like he doesn't act like the same person, so it's like he doesn't have that relationship anymore. But
yeah, but there's a lot of nice subtle things with Rocket. He was like he's just a raccoon who was experimented on and turned into this thing. There's a lot of nice subtle things throughout the thing that help him grow as a character, and even though Groot only ever says the one word, you understand him and you feel for him, and his sacrifice at the end actually works. Which this movie, there's a lot of humor in it, but it's another one where it balances the humor and the drama, and the emotional moments work in this movie. And Star-Lord's arc also, again, it's a lot of jokey stuff, but at the end when he has that vision of his mom and he lets her go, basically, it works emotionally, which a lot of these movies struggle with doing that. So I think it's a very solid movie. It was, it's very unique, and I did find it funny, and it has a nice soundtrack. And I think most of the characters and their story arcs work. It does have a very terrible villain in Ronan, the Accuser. There isn't really much to say about him. He's just a alien guy who wants to destroy a planet. That's just it. There really isn't. I don't know what to say about him. That's what he wants to do, and that's what he is. And there's nothing to him, unfortunately. Again, it's just the same old thing. Again, with a lot of these Marvel villains, but luckily, everything else mainly works. The Collector is a very interesting and cool part of the movie. All the things around it. Ronan is basically just there to keep the plot going and for this threat. So, nothing's perfect, but I really like the first Guardians of the Galaxy. It's all pretty well put together. The action, I don't know.
it's not great.
It's not great. The second one kind of has better action, I guess. I like the opening scene with Star-Lord in the chase. I like that, but yeah, I don't even remember much of the action after that. It's not that great. There's something I forgot to say about the second one. I think it takes some of the action scenes too far, and they feel like pointless. Like the part when the smugglers come and try to capture Groot and Rocket, and then Rocket is setting up all those booby traps in the woods. I think the scene just drags on a little too much, and it takes it too far.
Maybe, yeah.
And it's an entertaining scene, but it just felt pointless. The first movie, nothing in it really feels that pointless. Like, again, the second movie is more ambitious and takes things to crazier levels, but the first movie just is more well put together structurally, and it never feels like it drags or anything, which unlike the second movie. So overall, I really like it. It's one of the best Marvel movies.
Alright, so yeah, my number 6 is also Guardians of the Galaxy, actually. So I do like the second one better. I think the second one's a little bit better visually, and it goes a little more in depth with some of the characters. But I do think the first movie is tighter. I think all the characters, other than maybe Drax, have a pretty decent arc. Gamora doesn't have that much to do either, but she has a decent arc. I do really like Rocket. I think him and Star-Lord both have really, really good arcs. The movie is really, I think, funny and entertaining generally. I really love just the opening scene where Star-Lord, well, I guess it's not the opening scene, but the opening credits where he's dancing around and with "Come and Get Your Love" playing and all that. I really kind of hate Ronan, especially because I've read comics with the character and he's so much more interesting. He's kind of like a Judge Dredd character almost, except much more powerful. So yeah, he's kind of fascinating in the comics, and here he's just really, really one note. And it kind of doesn't matter in the context of the movie, just because, again, he's just sort of there to move the plot forward, and this is, like an origin movie or whatever, and it's more focused on the main cast. So I don't have a problem with it in the context of the movie so much, but it does, as a fan, bother me. When the movie first came out, one of the things I liked a lot was just how crazy it was. You have a talking raccoon in a tree walking around. It's not the kind of thing I thought I'd ever see in a mainstream movie, and it became this huge hit. So that's really cool, just as a comic book fan, to see that. And yeah, I do really like this movie, and it's really really entertaining, and probably one of the more rewatchable Marvel movies. It's not perfect, the action isn't great, it's not that great visually, the villain sucks, but it's still one of the better Marvel movies.
Alright, so the number 5 on my list is Doctor Strange. I had similar experience, but the first time I watched it, I was just like, it's alright. It's like kind of like Ant-Man or something, where it's just fine. But then when I watched it again, I really, really liked it. And I think it's sick. So it's one of the best ones, I think, in my opinion. It's the second best origin, really, I think, of any of them.
Yeah, for sure.
They've done,
Iron Man.
other than Iron Man, which there is a few similarities narratively,
For sure.
and in the themes maybe, but it's still, it stands on its own. It's much different than Iron Man, so I think it's pretty good. Like you said, Benedict Cumberbatch, the accent works for me. I mean, maybe if I was paying attention to it more, like actually how he was saying, it might bother me a little bit, but I never thought at any point, anytime I watched it, that there was anything off about that.
No, it doesn't really bother me either. I just heard people complain about
Other than the fact that he has to put on an accent, he's a perfect choice really to play Doctor Strange, which he plays in very well. And yeah, the supporting characters, the Sorcerer Supreme, what's his name? The guy who helps train him.
Mordu, I think.
Yeah, Mordu. They're all very good. Mordu is one of the most fascinating characters that they've had in a Marvel movie in a long time, and there's certainly a lot of potential in the sequel for them to do things with him. I really like him. And the villain, like you said, the actor's kind of wasted. He has some good scenes, and I do like that he does challenge the hero's viewpoint at that point, and the Sorcerer Supreme's viewpoint. But that's what good villains should do. But there's not really enough of that, and there isn't much to him beyond that. But he's a little like better than some of the really dull ones. So that is good. Like the soundtrack, also a lot of Marvel movies don't have the best soundtracks. This one is a little bit better than some of them. And the world, I think this one does a better job of setting up the world than like Black Panther did. It feels there's still like a lot of exposition scenes. It flows a little more naturally into the movie and works a little bit better.
It's much more organic, I think.
And overall, since they did have to introduce all the magic stuff, they did a pretty good job of introducing it, and it makes sense, and you believe it, and it works pretty well. The action isn't that great. When it gets all like crazy and Inception-y, it is pretty entertaining though.
Yeah.
Like when they're running through the city. Skylar just kind of wasted his role. I mean, the action scene is probably better than it would have been if they had other people, but knowing what he is capable of, it's a little unfortunate. But what are you gonna do? It's just how these movies are. Yeah, I really like this movie. Watching it again, it's one of the. I'd say it's one of the, like, it would be higher, but there's just some characters who I find more interesting overall, which is partly why some of the movies are a little bit higher, but it's one of the most solid, well put together Marvel movies out there, I think.
Okay, so my next pick, my number 5 pick, is Iron Man 3. So, a lot of people hate this movie. I don't. I never really hated it. I always thought it was really good. I'm a Shane Black fan. I like The Weapon, and the Nice Guys was really great. So maybe I'm a little biased, and I'm also not like the biggest Iron Man fan. Like I read Iron Man comics, but I've never actually read a Mandarin comic, so I don't know what he's like in the comics that much. I will say the twist in some ways was disappointing, just because he was set up really well in the trailers and in the movie itself. But it is kind of clever, and I like where it ends up going. And I think it works, in the context of the movie well. But I understand completely why people were upset about it. But I think just judging the movie on its own terms, I think it works really well. I think it's one of the more unique Marvel movies. It feels very much like the work of the director and not like just another studio film. It has, I think, until the end scene, I think the action's all really solid. I mean, it's pretty like basic stuff, but it works really well and like works in the context of the story and doesn't feel forced or like overdone or anything. I think Tony Stark has a really interesting arc in this movie. It's a little rushed near the end. I think in general the third act is a little bit rushed and muddled, but up to that point I think he has a really interesting arc. And I like how this is, in many ways, more of a sequel to Avengers than it is to Iron Man 2. I think it has well, like I already said, it has a really unique feel. It feels very much like an 80s action buddy comedy thing. I wish Rhodey had more to do, but it's sort of just an ongoing thing with all these movies, so whatever.
He gets the most to do in this movie.
Yes. And I think Aldrich Killian, played by Guy Pearce, is a really interesting villain. In some ways, he's one of the better MCU villains. I mean, he's not like really charismatic or anything necessarily, or like he's not really a colorful villain, but he's a really interesting villain. He has an interesting kind of psychology and an interesting worldview, and the way he challenges Tony Stark, psychologically and physically is really interesting, I think. I like the relationship between Tony and the kid, whose name I don't remember, but
I don't know. Does the movie ever like give him a name?
Must, right? I don't know. But anyway, I think that's really well done. It feels very Shane Black-y again. I mean, maybe they take some of the stuff a little far with like how abusive he is, but
It's funny.
yeah, it's funny. And the whole thing with the PTSD is well done. And yeah, I think the movie just in general is really well done. Other than again, the third act is a little bit clunky, but yeah.
Alright, number 4 for me is Iron Man 3, which we just talked about. Yeah, I really, really like this movie. I know a lot of people don't, but, like you, I really liked it when I first saw it, and I still really like it every time I've seen it after. Again, like you, I understand why people dislike the Mandarin thing so much. As someone who has never read a comic with them, I can't have that perspective on it. But there's not only that, just because he was built up so much in the trailers and throughout the movie. And, it looks like they were going to go back to more Iron Man 1 and have it a little bit more grounded and have a more grounded villain. And then they ended up not doing that. But the twist is just, it did work for me. It is conflicting because, I would have wanted, this big scary villain. But I think it worked overall, and it works well in the story and context and themes that the movie is trying to do, with Aldrich Killian actually being the big bad guy. I do also think he's a pretty good villain. The fact that it isn't revealed until later on in the movie diminishes him a little bit, just because he seems like more of a side player up until then, so we don't have as much time to build up his threateningness. He is a very threatening villain and an interesting one, so it's pretty good overall, but that's not until the last act of the movie more. Tony Stark, again, he's one of the best characters in the entire MCU, and he continues to grow and is very interesting and has an interesting story arc in this movie. Shane Black does a really good job with that. The third act, as you said, also it's after they find out that the guy isn't really the Mandarin, and then they have to go to the thing, and then everything feels a bit clunky and rushed at the end. I'd also say that I do find this movie really funny.
Yeah.
I also really like Shane Black in all his movies that I've seen, so his type of humor and how he directs movies and things works for me. It's kind of the MCU movie that started doing this thing where they make it more jokey, and which has led to, as I've talked about with other movies, them taking it too far.
I feel like it was more Guardians than that.
Making it not work as well. So like this is the first one where like they have the hero moment, but then there's like a joke where after he saves the new one in the water, he drives away and then he gets hit by the truck.
Yeah, that's true.
But it doesn't bother me as much in this movie. I think other movies take it too far and
I think Shane Black knows how to
Shane Black is good at doing this sort of thing, and it's just again, it's about balance, and this movie balances it. It has some symptoms, I'll say, of things getting a little too silly and them taking away from the heroic moments or the character moments, but it's balanced pretty well. So yeah, overall it's really good. I really like Shane Black, and this very much feels like a Shane Black movie. With a lot of these Marvel movies, sometimes it can just they all feel the same sometimes. That was initially one of my problems with Doctor Strange, where it just kind of felt like another Marvel movie, but I just think it's really well done, so it works. But this one feels really unique, and the director's unique vision works. So it's a very good balance of the humor and the drama and the director's vision and what Marvel wants, and it all comes together really well. It isn't perfect, as we discussed, but it's really good.
Okay, so my number 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So again, I like this movie quite a bit. When I first saw it, I kind of thought it was like this perfect masterpiece or something, and I've definitely sort of calmed down about it since then. I do think it's a very flawed movie. Okay, I think some of the stuff with Peter and his dad could be handled a little better. Part of that is some of the humor not working and undermining it a little bit. But part of it is just that it feels like maybe there's just not enough time to develop it with everything else going on, which you've talked about. I think everything else works pretty well. I think the other characters all have a good enough arc. I really like what they did with Rocket and Yondu, even if it doesn't, again, which you mentioned earlier, feel necessarily like it continues that well from the first movie. I think if they had discussed more what happened to Groot and the fact that he's kind of a completely different person, that might have helped. And it also might have helped if we got more stuff with Yondu and Peter in the first movie. But I think this movie does a good job with what it's trying to do for the most part. And I think it's one of the more, for me at least, emotional MCU movies. I always get a little bit choked up near the end when Yondu's having his funeral. And maybe it's just that I personally relate to it in some level. I don't know. But I think that's probably the reason it's as high on my list as it is. And it does feel very much like the work of the director. I think it's visually really amazing. It has a really good soundtrack. Like you said, it has some pacing issues, especially near like the middle section. There are some scenes that could definitely be a little shorter. In some ways, I'm willing to cut the director some slack if that's the way he wants to approach it. But yeah, I think it could be some tightening up for sure. I think some of the themes about abuse are maybe a little undermined in some way just because of the way that they treat Mantis like a joke, which bothers me. But yeah, it's definitely a flawed movie, but it's one of those movies where there's some really great stuff and some not so great stuff, and for me the really great stuff kind of outweighs the bad stuff. I think the more I see it, I'll probably like it less, but as of now, it's my number 4. So.
All right, my number 3, we're in my top 3 now, is the Avengers, the original Avengers. This is one of the best Marvel movies out there. It's of the ones with the bigger casts. Obviously, it's a smaller cast than the ones that we're getting now. But with the ones with the bigger cast, it does its best job of balancing everyone out and giving everyone on screen time. And the movie doesn't feel clunky or rushed or too long or anything. It's very well put together movie, which is impressive. And it has the best Marvel villain that there is with Loki. My only problem with him is he's not physically threatening enough. A villain doesn't necessarily have to be, but with Loki, after he gets captured on purpose in Berlin, basically anytime there's a fighting thing with him, he just it's just like a punchline with him. Where there's the Hulk thing, which is really funny, but it's like okay, and then Hawkeye shoots an arrow at him and he catches it, and then it blows up in his face. And then the part when he's trying to act all threatening with Black Widow, but then it just turned out she was manipulating him. He comes off. I mean, and I know it's kind of sort of part of the point. He just kind of comes off as pathetic sometimes. But he's a very interesting villain, and it's a really great performance, so he mainly works. But I just wish, and as I've said it before, some of the other ones, that these villains were just more threatening. With Marvel, it seems like either the villains are really threatening or they're interesting. They can't do both. Sometimes they do, but I wish they could find that balance more. But other than that, he's a really great villain. It has an amazing soundtrack, and the main Avengers theme is really great. All the characters, I like how they bring all the characters together, and while I understand why they didn't in the second one, I kind of wish that they did it again, where they all have to, they're all off doing their own thing and you have to come together again, because it worked really well in the first movie. And I know the first movie is the first Avengers movie, so they have to learn how to work together, which they do a good job of that. All the characters, they all come together and works well, and all the little things. Hawkeye gets pushed to the side because he's being mind controlled through the whole thing, and then he just isn't at the end, and he doesn't have anything to do. But with these kind of movies, it's really hard. I think it's kind of a fundamental flaw that is basically impossible to get away from when you have the giant ensemble cast movies. You can't do everything, and I would rather have it that way, where you don't do stuff with some of the characters instead of trying to do something with every character. It's like what I said with Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the second Avengers movie. When you try to do that, the movie just gets clunky, and it doesn't work that well because you just don't have that much time, and you can't do it. It's just too many characters. So this movie, it's a smaller cast overall, and other than Hawkeye, it's able to focus up on these other characters and bring them together and show how they come together and get over their problems and things they may not like about each other and work together and save the day in the Avengers. And it's just again, like the first Guardians of the Galaxy is just really well put together, really solid movie. When the ensemble cast characters mainly, it works very well together. The action, this again, we're kind of repeating ourselves, but these Marvel movies, they don't have the greatest action. It's a lot of it's just kind of bland, and then the big CGI stuff again. The CGI doesn't look horrible. It gets a little too Transformers-y, where there's just too much of it, and it goes on for too long, and you stop caring. It's unfortunate that, that's how it's going to be in these big blockbusters, but I wish the more personal fights, hand-to-hand, small, just between people, were a little bit better. Although, the fight between Iron Man and Thor is pretty good in the woods when they first meet. And then the part when their Hulk is rampaging through the helicarrier is also... I think it might be more just like it was just like the spectacle and the coolness of seeing these characters fight and interact with each other for the first time like that. But because there's nothing that great technically about them, but it was cool seeing that for the first time. I remember in theaters, this was a very memorable movie going experience, and it's still like that. Again, seeing them fight for the first time and together for the first time. So overall, it's one of the most solid, well put together Marvel movies. It's one of the best ones. There is some flaws, and they certainly get more ambitious as they go on, but I think this one's just more well put together and very solid, fun, enjoyable, well made movie.
Yeah. So my number 3 is actually Winter Soldier. I kind of went back and forth between Avengers and Winter Soldier, and I think Winter Soldier is the better film. I just don't enjoy it quite as much personally. But it's still an amazing movie, and maybe technically the best MCU movie. The twist in it, of course, is amazing. The whole Hydra thing, and it was really clever. I wish it kind of had more impact on the MCU moving forward, but at least thematically and character-wise, it has changed a lot of things. I really like what they did with Bucky, and I think that works really well. The movie just, emotionally, everything with Cap and Bucky works really well. I think you mentioned earlier that the plot stuff kind of overshadows the character stuff, and I think that is true, but since the plot stuff is interesting in some ways, reflects the character stuff in some ways, it works really well nonetheless. I think this is maybe probably the most flawless MCU movie, maybe. I think it has some of the best action in the MCU. It's not perfect. There are some quick cutty kind of stuff. The editing isn't always the best, but for the most part, it's all really solid action. The effects hold up really, really well. I think this is probably Chris Evans' best performance in the MCU so far, although Civil War rivals it to some extent. Again, everything between him and Bucky is just really great. He has a really good chemistry with Black Widow, too. Going back to the action scenes, I'm kind of rambling here, but the elevator scene is, one of the just standout scenes of the whole MCU, I think. The whole, escaping S.H.I.E.L.D. thing. I think the climax is maybe a little bit contrived with, we have to blow all the ships up even though I'm still on them. Mm-hmm. But it kind of works because, it's a character thing where it's I have to save Bucky, but I can't risk everything to save him, so I have to do this. There's, a cliche moment where Arnim Zola, which I thought that was also a really cool thing, that Arnim Zola's a computer, because it's like kind of sort of comic booky, but like interesting twist on it. But anyway, the part where he kind of reveals everything to Cap is pretty cliche, but again, it kind of works because he's stalling for time, because he's thinking that they're gonna all die and get blown up, and then they don't. So whatever. I think the score is effective. It's not like super memorable, but the musical score is effective. Yeah, it's just like a really, really solid movie overall. Samuel Jackson is really great in this movie. This is easily the best performance from him in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
He's like an interesting character in his own right. He's not just like a background guy in this movie. So yeah, it's really great. I don't know what else to say. Well, the one other thing I will say is Alexander Pierce is a pretty good villain. He's not like super threatening or anything, but it's the kind of thing where you don't really see it coming. And part of that's the casting, because you don't tend to see Robert Redford as like a villainous character. So that was really good casting, I think. And the movie, was just generally, I think, really well acted and well done. And I'm kind of repeating myself, but yeah.
Yeah, alright, so my number 2 is Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I really, really love this movie. This movie and my number 1, which is obvious at this point, are the only 2 Marvel movies that I would say are really amazing, and I generally just really, really love. I really like the Avengers and Iron Man 3 a lot, but these 2 are really good movies. I remember just smiling through almost the whole thing in this movie.
In the theater?
Yes, in the theater when I was watching it. Even though, like, the last time I watched it, like, certain parts I just had these big smiles comes on my face, and I really love this movie. This movie, up to this point, I didn't like Captain America that much in the MCU. I really liked him in comic books. The Winter Soldier comic book story arc is actually one of my favorite ones ever. So I was very worried about this movie because, the first Captain America, it starts out really good, but then it kind of falls apart. And then in the Avengers, I guess his mage just costume kind of looks stupid, and he's not like as cool as I wanted to be, because he's really cool sometimes in the comics. But this movie, he's a really interesting character. He's a very interesting arc in his relationship with Bucky. They do a very good job, like in the comic. As I said briefly, I mentioned it before, and as you touched on, I wish that his relationship with Bucky was more at the forefront, like it is in Civil War. But it's still, anytime they have any of that, it's still really good. And the main story is also one of the better ones in the Marvel movies, and the big plot with Hydra. This movie it feels very impactful. Just everything feels very impactful, and it all feels very grounded, and all the effects are really good, and I believe all the effects, and I'm engaged in it. And the action, it's not the best. There's some like sped up stuff and quick editing, but it's better than a lot of the Marvel movies, I would say. And the Winter Soldier, I said before, he's a very fascinating character, and he's a very physically threatening character. At like every time, like other than Cap, you feel like no one else has a chance of beating this guy at all. He has a pretty good theme. It's not the best music in the world, but you don't really remember it after you watch it, but while you're watching the movie, the music works really well.
It's effective
with it. Yeah, and Chris Evans is probably one of his best performances. Scarlett Johansson,
I think
Samuel L. Jackson, they're all really at the top of their game. Very interesting. They all work well together. It's a very tight movie because it's very, there's not a ton of characters. It's mainly just a lot of the movie. It's just Captain America and Black Widow together, because
we should probably talk about Falcon.
Nick Fury is not in it that much, and then Falcon is also in it. And while he is kind of like Rhodey, where in these movies he tends to get underutilized, in this movie I think he's certainly the best. He's used the best here, and they do a really good job where he's introduced in this movie, but they do a good job of introducing him and giving him that bond with Cap and their friendship. It's impressive because they have to introduce him and then turn him into Falcon and have his relationship with Cap be believable, and they do a pretty good job. Yeah. At the end, in the last act, when all the fighting's going down, he kind of gets pushed to the side, but even then, he has something to do because he has to fight Rimlo. But I can see it was a little pushed aside, but yeah. So overall, it's just a very tight, like the best moment was very tight, well put together. So to focus up on a small amount of characters and do a lot of interesting things with them, and they all worked well together. Yeah, it all just comes together really well. It's one of the best Marvel movies.
Okay, so my number 2 is the Avengers. So, like I said, I think Winter Soldier is the better film, but this one is just so entertaining. And like it's just like it has kind of had an impact on me to some extent. Like I'll never forget going to see it in theaters for the first time. I mean, like it's the kind of thing as a comic book fan you never think you're gonna see, and then you have all these different heroes from different movies come together in one movie. It was just kind of like a once in a lifetime sort of movie that kind of changed movies for better or for worse. And yeah, I mean, I think it definitely has some flaws. I think Hawkeye could be done better. He's kind of not shoehorned, but like
Brushed to the side.
Yeah, he's kind of brushed to the side. I think some of the fights between the main characters feel a little bit forced, and like it's just there for fan service, and like, there's a lot of stuff like that in general in the movie. The action isn't the best. Visually, it's kind of boring. Josh Whedon isn't really a great director. I think he's more of a writer than a director. He's good with actors, but behind the camera, he doesn't really have like an eye for like visual storytelling as much. But it is a really well written movie. I think all the characters other than Hawkeye have really interesting interactions and arcs and things. Thor maybe doesn't have the most to do. Again, he's sort of the one element that they don't seem to know what to do with in these movies. Like he's upset about Loki, but he doesn't really have as much of a stake in things, and I don't know. That could be better. But and then the other problem is the Hulk stuff is a little bit confusing and muddled, where it's like I'm not 100% sure. Like I guess he knows how to control it now, and he's always angry or something, but it's a little bit confusing. I think Whedon has some kind of idea in his head they didn't really communicate as well as he could have.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you know how to control it, why are you like so always like anxious and upset about it if you have it under control, which you seem to be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like he has it under control and he can control it, but he can also lose control. But it's not as well explained as it could be. But yeah, the cast all have really good chemistry and they're well written. Like I said, it has a really good score. The action isn't great, but it is a lot of fun, especially the whole end thing, even if it goes on a little too long and kind of ends anticlimactically. Loki, as you said, is the best MCU villain, and I think this is kind of his best performance overall. Yeah, he's made a little bit of a joke sometimes, but that's sort of the way the character is, so like I don't really mind. I think this movie generally balances the humor and the drama really well. Josh Whedon is kind of a master when it comes to that. The dialogue, I think, well, I don't know, but the dialogue is really good. I think killing Coulson was a good way to kind of bring the Avengers together, and I think it like impacts the movie well. And I'm like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan and stuff, so I think it's cool just on that regard because it kind of helped create that.
Yeah.
I think the thing with the nuclear bomb was kind of an interesting way to go, and it sort of foreshadows Winter Soldier in interesting ways. And I like Tony Stark's sacrifice at the end. I hate Cap's costume in this, but I think he's still well done and has interesting. Again, a lot of it foreshadows Winter Soldier and later Civil War. And yeah, I think they just did a really good job of kind of culminating Phase 1 and setting up for Phase 2. And yeah, this movie's just a ton of fun, and it's probably maybe the MCU movie other than Iron Man that we've seen the most. Yeah. So yeah, I don't have a ton to say about it. It's not perfect. It's a little bit like light as far as character and theme goes, but it's a ton of fun. So.
All right, so my number one of all the MCU movies is Iron Man, the first one. I really thought this would change, after all these years.
10 years.
It kind of, like, for a while I kind of liked the Avengers the best, and then for a while I kind of liked Winter Soldier the best, but going back and watching them, they really hit the nail on the head with their first movie. It's just, things have changed a lot, and even just how they go about making the movies and the tone of the movies have changed but it really this movie is just. And like even it's gotten better. Like I really liked it. Like really liked it at first. One of my favorite movies. And then after some time I thought about it, and I was like, okay, there's some problems with it. But one of the bigger problems, and a problem that a lot of people talked about, going back and watching it again, the fact that a lot of people, I mean, it's a little bit true where they say that the last act, it just kind of divulges into your typical superhero romp of just like the hero's kind of gone through his journey and they have nothing else to do, so then the big villain just comes and they fight for a while, and it doesn't make any sense why the villain does this, but that is sort of true. But watching again, it does make sense why Obadiah does it, because I don't know why I didn't catch this and why other people don't really catch it, but his back's against the wall and he doesn't have any other play. And really, all he has to do, if he kills the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and if he kills Tony Stark, then he can still get away with it. And so he goes into the big suit, which is right there, because he's just an old guy. So obviously, I'm going to go into the big suit and I'm going to kill these people. But then, Iron Man puts up more of a fight than I guess he thought, and he loses at the end. But the first time I watched it, I thought, well, this is just stupid. But it makes more sense because he doesn't have any other option. But going back to some other things. Robert Downey Jr. Now it just seems like he was born to play this role. He's really amazing through the whole thing, and this is one of the best superhero story arcs that's been done in any movie, really, from where he starts off to where he ends up. The origin is amazingly done, where he gets captured and put into this prison cave, and he has to build the suit to get out, and you really see him change in there and become a different person, and then he continues to grow throughout the movie. And this movie, like the emotional moments, it works better than really any of the other MCU movies, especially the speech he gives to Pepper near the end, right before the last act of the movie, where I don't think I'm saying it directly right, but he says something like, "I just finally know what I have to do."
Yeah, I know in my heart that's right.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be alive. Unless it was for a reason. I'm not crazy, Pepper. I just finally know what I have to do. And I know in my heart that it's right.
It just that scene, like, it really hit me the last time we watched it. And some of the Marvel movies, they get better and they have better stuff like this, but that one, it really worked the best. And it's a lot of it is performance and just the heart and soul that was put into this movie. You really feel it, and it's there more than a lot of these other movies are now. And just the effort that they put into making this movie work, and the effects are all really amazing, because most of it in the end is CGI, but they tried to do a lot of practical stuff and they just put CGI over it later, and you really feel it. The movie feels very real. And that's something that people often struggle with CGI, is even if it looks good, it doesn't feel real. It feels real in this movie, and you're very engaged and fully enveloped into the world. And it's just a really good movie. And maybe the third act, it's a little iffy, but it works better than a lot of superhero third acts do. And I think overall, it's just a really great movie. It started this whole thing off, and they never really did it better, in my opinion.
Yep. So my number one is also Iron Man, obviously. And a lot of people think this movie hasn't aged well, but I think it's aged really well. I still think it's the best MCU film. It is the most emotionally impactful for me, and it's just like, it's not even like that emotional of a moment. Like, he's just talking to Pepper, that one scene that you talked about, but it just feels, you just feel it, and you feel this arc that he's gone through. And yeah, it's really well written, and of course a lot of it we know now was improv, and they kind of had to make it up as they go, and it's sort of amazing how well it turned out, I think. And this movie, maybe more than any MCU movie, feels like the work of the director and the filmmakers, and not so much like a studio film. As you said, the effects hold up really, really well. This is the last movie Stan Winston worked on. God rest his soul and all that. The action, it isn't great or anything, but like, it's all coherent and well shot. Robert Downey Jr., as you said, is amazing, and I think his chemistry with Gwyneth Paltrow, and also with Jeff Bridges is really good. Rhodey isn't, again, a little bit shoved to the side in this movie, but it works a little better here because he's really more of a supporting character at this point. I think Don Cheadle is probably better in the role. I do like Terrence Howard a lot, but Don Cheadle kind of fits the role a little better.
It took a while, but he grew on me, and after I met him, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Really well.
The score isn't the best. I like sort of the sound they come up with. It's very this like rock and rolly kind of thing, but it's not the most memorable thing ever. I think visually this movie's pretty strong. It's one of the few Marvel movies that was shot on film, and I think that kind of shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean generally it's a really, really well done movie. It's the one Marvel movie I've probably watched the most, and I go back to the most, and I think it just holds up incredibly well. So there it is. So yeah, Infinity War is coming out tonight. Hopefully we'll get this up to today. We'll see, I guess, how that fits into our rankings and how it pays off everything that they've been building since Avengers. But
it's gonna be messy, probably.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be amazing.
At this point, I think you can probably tell we're not the most enthusiastic about the MCU in general. But there are a lot of good movies there for sure, and it's sort of amazing, like how much stuff they've done and how consistently good these movies have been, even if they're flawed.
Yeah. I don't hate any of them. Really, most of them have a lot of big flaws. Kind of. Really, there's only one or two that are really just like these are dull and boring movies. Most of them have some pretty good, interesting stuff, and there's some running themes of problems that go from movie to movie. But it's a very impressive thing, and they're all enjoyable to an extent, and some of them are legitimately really amazing.
Yeah. All right, that's it, guys. Like and subscribe. I guess we'll pause for that.
You're making me like it less. Yeah, those two things you said kind of like pinpoint like the crux of why it doesn't really work, because there's just so much going on and it moves so quickly.
Yeah.
And the effects are bad, which it makes it feel like cinematic, like you said. Like when you're watching it, like it feels like this should be this huge big thing.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like a Transformers movie.
But
I mean,
it doesn't feel that way though. Like it seems like it should, but it doesn't really feel it when you're watching it.
Okay. I lost track of my train of thought.